What if everything you knew about history was wrong? Because the real evidence is still buried. Across deserts, under oceans, deep inside mountains, and frozen in time lie the clues to forgotten worlds and forbidden stories. These aren't just ruins, they're ruptures in the timeline, tombs that rewrite empires, artifacts that defy logic, and cities that were never supposed to exist. Some were found by accident, others hidden on purpose, but all of them whisper the same thing. History isn't dead, it's just waiting to be unearthed. Welcome to 100 archaeological discoveries that changed history forever. Before we dig any deeper, quick question. Where in the world are you tuning in from, and what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments. We're building a global timeline together, and if ancient mysteries, lost civilizations, and history's best-kept secrets are your kind of late-night fuel, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what gets unearthed next. 1. Göbekli Tepe. Once upon a time, roughly 11,000 years ago, someone in southeastern Turkey got the bright idea to carve massive T-shaped stones, haul them up a hill, and arrange them in neat little circles that no one would live in. No signs of habitation, no nearby farming, not even a decent snack bar. Just dozens of towering monoliths etched with foxes, snakes, vultures, and the occasional headless human. The site, dubbed Göbekli Tepe, was buried on purpose around 8000 BCE, as if someone very ancient and very organized wanted the whole thing forgotten, and it almost was before its discovery in the 980s. Conventional wisdom held that monumental architecture came after agriculture. People farmed, settled down, then got bored enough to build temples. But Göbekli Tepe laughs in the face of that timeline. Its builders were hunter-gatherers. No cities, no wheat, no wheels, just a need to erect sanctuaries that suggest a spiritual life came first, and maybe civilization was just a side effect. The stones don't talk, and the skeletons are missing, but there's one silent, immovable contradiction. These prehistoric people weren't supposed to be this organized. They were supposed to be primitive. So who buried a sacred site the size of a football field with clean, careful intent? And if belief built society, then what does that say about what we're still building today? 2. Rosetta Stone. When Napoleon's troops dug a fort near Rashid in 1799, they expected dirt, maybe an ambush. What they unearthed instead was the Rosetta Stone, a bureaucratic announcement in 3 scripts: Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphs, praising Ptolemy V for slashing taxes. Divine? Hardly, but revolutionary? Absolutely. This slab of granodiorite, measuring just under 4 feet, was the key to unlocking 3 years of locked Egyptian silence. Before its discovery, hieroglyphs were artistic gibberish to modernize, elaborate cartoons with no known grammar. But thanks to the stone and a lot of philological sweat, mostly by Champollion, not the British who stole it, ancient Egypt's long-dead voices got their words back. But here's the real twist. The Rosetta Stone was a glorified PR campaign. It wasn't sacred. It wasn't mystical. It was tax propaganda in triplicate, yet it cracked open entire kingdom, myths, and funerary texts that had become little more than tomb wallpaper. So the key to Egypt's grandeur turned out to be a receipt, an accidental survival of imperial paperwork, which begs the question, what have we already thrown away, assuming it was just junk? Maybe the next key to history is already rotting in someone's filing cabinet. By the way, while we're still near the sands of Egypt and the highlands of Peru, where are you listening from, and what time is showing on your clock right now? Are you deep in the midnight rabbit hole or catching this between classes or shifts? Let us know in the comments, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell because we're only 2 discoveries in and things are about to get stranger. 3. Tutankhamun's tomb, KV62. When Howard Carter finally broke the seal of a dusty Egyptian tomb in 1922, he didn't expect gold. He didn't expect over 5,000 artifacts untouched for 3,000 years. And he certainly didn't expect to stumble into global superstardom by digging up a nearly forgotten teenage pharaoh named Tutankhamun, aka King Tut, aka the ancient world's most posthumously overexposed minor royal. Tut was nobody special when he lived, young, possibly sickly, politically inconsequential. His tomb was small and sloppy compared to Egypt's greatest rulers, but it was sealed and hidden, which made all the difference. KV-62 escaped centuries of grave robbers and became a time capsule of the 18th dynasty. Golden beds, ceremonial daggers made from meteorite iron, jars still reeking of perfume, even a pair of royal loincloths, never used, thankfully. And in the middle of it all, that now iconic golden death mask, staring forward with a fixed serenity that made him a legend, all because he was buried too quickly to be looted. The irony? Tut's fame rests not on what he did in life, but on how completely he was forgotten in death, until one day someone remembered to look. And if a forgotten boy king can reshape our view of a civilization, what else is waiting in the shadows? 4. Machu Picchu. The problem with calling Machu Picchu a lost city is that the locals always knew it was there. It was the rest of us, wandering conquistadors, bored scholars, and map-obsessed Victorians who needed to be reminded. Nestled between two Andean peaks obscured by jungle mist and global indifference, Machu Picchu sat undisturbed until Hiram Bingham discovered it in 1911 and took the credit. But what exactly was it? A royal retreat? A sacred site? A cosmic observatory? Whatever it was, the Incas didn't finish it, or didn't get to enjoy it for long. When the empire collapsed under Spanish invasion, Machu Picchu was abandoned, untouched by European looting or colonial rebranding. What survived were dry stone walls so perfectly cut you can't slip a knife between the blocks, agricultural terraces clinging to cliffs like green fingerprints, and temples aligned with solstices that make Stonehenge look like a sundial made by toddlers. But here's the bitter joke. It took outsiders to make the place famous. Bingham hauled artifacts back to Yale. Tourism did the rest. So the real mystery isn't just who built it, but who gets to claim it. When a culture collapses and another one writes the history, who really owns the ruins? 5. Pompeii and Herculaneum. Pompeii didn't die with a bang. It died with a choking gasp, mid-sentence. On August 24th, 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius did what volcanoes do: eruption, ashfall, pyroclastic tantrum. In less than 24 hours, life in Pompeii and neighboring Herculaneum was flash frozen in time. Dogs chained to doorways, loaves still baking in ovens, graffiti on the walls ranging from crude political satire to ancient pickup lines. For centuries, the cities lay buried, forgotten, almost mythical. Then they were rediscovered, accidentally as usual, and the archaeological world got its first unfiltered, X-rated look into Roman daily life. The brothels, the frescoes, the wine-stained courtyards and mosaic floors still bearing the marks of furniture legs. It wasn't Rome's triumphal arches or imperial decrees that survived. It was Tuesday afternoon. But it wasn't just preservation. It was preservation with intent. Vesuvius didn't just bury the city. It protected it. Like a cosmic archivist with no moral filter, Pompeii reminds us that history isn't made in marble halls. It's scratched on bathroom walls, drowned in kitchen pots, and curled up in bed with the cat. And if two entire cities can disappear under ash and only reappear by mistake, what else has history hidden beneath a few inches of dirt? 6. Dead Sea Scrolls. They weren't found in a museum. They weren't even found by archaeologists. The Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered by a Bedouin shepherd who was just trying to find a goat. Instead, he stumbled into a cave and cracked open the 20th century's most explosive biblical mystery. Over 900 manuscripts scattered across 11 caves near Qumran, hidden in ceramic jars like ancient Tupperware. Some were copies of Hebrew Bible texts 1,000 years older than any previously known. Others were apocalyptic visions, community rules, and weirdly specific laundry instructions from a mysterious sect, possibly the Essenes, but nobody agrees. And like all great mysteries, these scrolls raise more questions than they answer. Why were they hidden? Who wrote them? Why do some of the texts seem oddly heretical compared to the standard Bible? And how did so many survive in the desert, but not in the hands of those who supposedly preserved them? Scholars fought over them. Museums hoarded them. Forgeries flooded the market. And to this day, the scrolls remain a patchwork of theology, politics, and puzzle pieces that don't quite fit. They're sacred, mundane, cryptic, and occasionally boring, just like history. And in the shadows of those desert caves, a quiet question lingers. What if the truth was edited out of the final draft? 7. Terracotta Army. In 1974, farmers digging a well in Xi'an, China, thought they hit pottery. Technically, they weren't wrong. What they didn't expect was to unearth an entire underground army, life-sized warriors, chariots, horses, each one molded in clay with unique faces, armor, and hairdos. Some even had ears that don't match. The Terracotta Army was built for Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor, the man who unified the warring states, standardized weights and measures, and burned a lot of books just to make a point. His tomb complex, still largely unopened, was designed like a miniature universe, with rivers of mercury and stars painted on the ceiling, a world for the afterlife, or an empire buried with its emperor. Thousands of statues, rows upon rows, infantry, cavalry, acrobats, and bureaucrats, because even in death, an emperor needs paperwork. The sheer scale is staggering, but so is the paranoia. This was not a monument to peace. It was a fortress to defend against the afterlife, or maybe to keep something trapped inside. And if the part we can see looks like this, what's waiting behind the sealed tomb doors? 8. Troy, Hizarlik, Turkey. Troy was supposed to be a myth, a poetic fever dream cooked up by Homer to entertain Greeks with tales of love, rage, and wooden horse warfare. And then Heinrich Schliemann came along in the 19th century wearing a fedora and a very loose interpretation of the word archaeologist. He dug through layers of rubble in northwestern Turkey and announced, "I found it." Well, something was found. A lot of somethings, actually. 9 cities stacked like geological lasagna. The layer most often identified as Homer's Troy, Troy 7a, shows signs of war, fire, and sudden collapse around 1200 BCE, conveniently timed with the late Bronze Age's general meltdown. Was there a Helen, a Hector, a trick horse rolled through the gates? Probably not, but there was a real city, strategically placed and violently destroyed. What's fascinating isn't just the discovery, it's the way the myth turned out to be built over facts, or the facts were molded by the myth. Either way, history and legend share a very porous border, and if Troy is real, what else did we write off as fiction too soon? 9. The Library of Ashurbanipal. Long before Alexandria, there was Nineveh, and in the ruins of its royal palace, archaeologists unearthed a treasure not of gold or gems, but of cuneiform tablets, tens of thousands of them, epic poems, omen catalogs, rituals, tax records, and demon-fighting instructions. This was the Library of Ashurbanipal, Assyria's last great king and history's first known obsessive book collector. Among the tablets was the Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest surviving literary work, a tale of gods, floods, friendship, and existential dread. It predates the Bible and reads like a hangover from creation itself. But what's most eerie is the ambition.
Ashurbanipal didn't just want knowledge, he wanted all of it. He had scribes copy texts from across Mesopotamia, preserve spells, medical prescriptions, political treaties, an entire civilization on clay. And then it all burned. Ironically, the fire baked the tablets, preserving them better than time ever could. So a king tried to immortalize wisdom and accidentally did, thanks to his enemies. There's something poetic about that. And among the unread tablets, still half buried in museum, the ancient voice murmur on, waiting for someone to finish the story.
10. Indus Valley civilization sites, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, etc. No pyramids, no ziggurats, no flashy tombs or boastful statues. The Indus Valley civilization didn't need grand monuments to prove its brilliance. It left behind plumbing. At Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists found cities laid out in precise grids with standardized bricks, centralized drainage, public baths, and, get this, multi-story homes around 2500 BCE. While much of the world was still figuring out how to store grain, the Indus people were running municipal sanitation. They even had seals with strange symbols, script maybe, or just iconography that no one has deciphered to this day, which means we don't know what they called themselves or what they believed or why, after centuries of urban stability, they just faded out. There are no obvious invaders, no signs of war, no dramatic final burn layer, just a slow unraveling, like someone pulled the plug on an entire civilization and let it drain silently into obscurity. And the kicker? The system was better organized than many modern cities, clean, orderly, mysteriously modest. So if civilization isn't measured in conquest or kings, but in quiet infrastructure, were they the most advanced of all? And if they disappeared without leaving a boast behind, how many other forgotten worlds are still buried under our feet?
11. Nazca Lines. In the bone-dry deserts of southern Peru, someone, no one knows quite who, decided to scratch hundreds of enormous shapes into the Earth's surface. These are the Nazca Lines, stylized hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, and countless geometric figures etched across the desert floor with no apparent purpose and no clear audience. From the ground, they're nearly invisible. From the sky, they're spectacular. That's the first mystery. The second is everything else. Were they ritual pathways, astronomical calendars, offerings to deities who preferred the aerial view, or maybe giant cryptic billboards no one has fully translated? Some lines stretch for kilometers, perfectly straight through uneven terrain that defies simple tools or casual planning. The precision is unsettling, especially from a civilization that didn't leave behind texts to explain what all the walking, carving, and dust blowing was for. And then there's the timing. These geoglyphs were created over centuries, long before planes or even ladders high enough to see the full design existed, which makes them either an extraordinary act of blind faith or a reminder that human ambition often aims well above its line of sight. We still don't know why they did it, but when an ancient culture draws pictures too big to see without flying, who were they trying to impress?
12. Altamira cave paintings. When a little girl stumbled into a cave in northern Spain in 1879 and looked up, she saw red bison staring back at her. Her father, an amateur archaeologist, claimed the ceiling was covered in Paleolithic art. He was ridiculed, accused of forgery, and dismissed by a world unwilling to believe that prehistoric people were capable of such elegance. Decades later, science caught up. The Altamira cave paintings were real, and they were ancient, over 14,000 years old. The walls are covered in lifelike animals, painted in ochre and charcoal, shaded with natural rock contours to mimic volume. These weren't scribbles. They were deliberate, almost theatrical renderings of wildlife from a vanished world. But the question isn't how they were made. it's why. These caves weren't homes. There's little evidence of day-to-day life inside. They may have been sacred spaces, memory theaters, or galleries for unseen spirits, or maybe they were just humanity's first experiments with the power of image, telling stories when words didn't exist yet. And here's the irony. Our earliest ancestors expressed themselves with vivid, moving pictures, only to have their meaning drift out of reach. When even their artistry can't explain their intent, what else are we misreading in our own reflections?
13. Lascaux Cave, France, 1940. Four teenage boys chasing a dog stumbled into a cave. What they found wasn't treasure, it was time travel. Lascaux's walls exploded with color and motion. Bulls mid-charge, deer mid-leap, horses galloping across the stone like animated dreams. Roughly 17,000 years old, the Lascaux cave paintings are among the most famous examples of Paleolithic art. More than 600 animals, many rendered with astonishing detail and motion. These people didn't just draw what they saw, they drew what they felt. Motion, rhythm, myth, and again the mystery deepens. No one knows why these caves were painted. Some say it was shamanic ritual. Others suggest early proto-narrative, the first flickers of story. Maybe it was just awe, scratched and painted onto a wall because speech wasn't enough. But then Lascaux was sealed to protect it from us. Too many breathless tourists, literally. Human presence was altering the fragile cave atmosphere. So the original was closed, a replica built. The real stories are now locked away, protected from the people most desperate to see them. So we recreate what we can, echo what we guess, but maybe the message was never meant for us to understand in the first place.
14. Çatalhöyük, no streets, no doors, just a honeycomb of mud brick homes stacked and fused like Lego blocks, each with a roof entrance and a hidden history. Welcome to Çatalhöyük, a Neolithic settlement in central Turkey that rewrote what we thought early cities were supposed to look like. First excavated in the 1950s, Çatalhöyük is over 9,000 years old, but it doesn't look like a city. There's no palace, no temple, no big man's house on a hill, just 1,000 homes where people lived, died, and buried their dead under the floorboards, right below where their children later slept. Wall paintings depict hunting scenes, vultures, and strange geometric symbols. Shrines are decorated with bull skulls and figurines. It was urban life before the hierarchy kicked in. But here's the twist. No clear evidence of centralized power, no king, no visible elite, just complex community planning without coercion. Was this the prehistoric version of a flat society? Or are we just too modern to recognize the power structures they had? Çatalhöyük is a riddle of shared space and quiet rituals where people lived close, died closer, and yet left no grand declarations of who ruled. Maybe the first cities weren't built for control. Maybe they were built for remembering. 15. Skara Brae, a storm off the coast of Orkney in 1850, ripped the grass from a hill and revealed something impossible. Stone houses older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, perfectly preserved under layers of sand and time. Skara Brae had been hidden for 5,000 years, and it looked like someone had just stepped out for a moment. Stone beds, shelves, hearths, even dressers, domestic architecture, frozen mid-scene. But the mystery isn't just in the preservation, it's in the intimacy. This wasn't a ceremonial site. This was home, a community of people who cooked, carved, argued, aged, and vanished. They had ornamentation, organization, and even, most mysteriously, indoor toilets. That's right, a Neolithic plumbing system more advanced than parts of 19th century London. But then they disappeared. No signs of war or catastrophe, just silence. Maybe the sea crept in. Maybe they outgrew the land. Maybe their stories simply stopped being told. What they left behind was humble, practical, and haunting. Not a monument to ego, but to daily life. And it makes you wonder, if our ruins were judged only by our living rooms, what would they say about us?
16. Royal Tombs of Standard of In the 1920s, archaeologist Leonard Woolley dug deep into the soil of southern Iraq and struck ancient gold, literally. Beneath the sands of once a thriving Sumerian city-state, lay royal tombs filled with treasures that glittered with 500-year-old ambition. He called it the Death Pit, though the glamour was more than morbid. Harps inlaid with lapis lazuli, daggers of gold, and the now famous Standard of a mosaic-covered box depicting scenes of war and peace. But the real value wasn't just in the bling, it was in the contradiction. The standard showed soldiers trampling enemies on one side and feasts with liars on the other, a duality baked into civilization from the start, brutality and refinement in the same breath. These weren't the mindless barbarians of modern myth, they were engineers of empire, bureaucrats of beauty. Ur's tombs also hinted at social structure, ritual, and early city-state politics. This was a place where writing began, where myth met law, and where the idea of civilization started strutting around with confidence. Yet for all its glory, Ur eventually collapsed. The rivers shifted, the people moved, and the city faded, which leaves one pressing thought. If this was their legacy, what will ours look like in 4,500 years?
17. Knossos, Palace of Knossos. In the early 20th century, British archaeologist Arthur Evans uncovered a sprawling ruin on Crete and declared it the Palace of King Minos. Labyrinthine corridors, vibrant frescoes, and storerooms crammed with massive jars. He named the civilization the Minoans after the mythical king who kept a minotaur in the basement. It was a convenient story. It just wasn't entirely true. Knossos wasn't just a palace. It was a complex, multi-level administrative and ceremonial center of an advanced Bronze Age culture. The Minoans had writing, linear A, still undeciphered, plumbing, art obsessed with bulls, and a flair for abstract beauty. Their walls were alive with blue dolphins, acrobats flipping over charging bulls, women with bare arms and braided hair, and yet no defensive walls, no obvious army, no great declarations of conquest, a culture that may have built its power through trade, not war, diplomacy, not domination, unless we're misreading the signs, because Knossos also fell, possibly to natural disaster, possibly to invasion. The palace was rebuilt, then abandoned. Evans reconstructed parts of it, perhaps too eagerly, blurring the line between archaeology and imagination. So was Knossos a myth built on ruins, or ruins built into myth? And what does it mean when even our facts need footnotes?
18. Akrotiri, Santorini, Thera. Beneath the volcanic island of Santorini lies the ancient city of Akrotiri, preserved in volcanic ash like a Bronze Age time capsule. Often called the Pompeii of the Aegean, it's more haunting than fiery, because unlike Pompeii, there are no bodies, no bones, just furniture, frescoes, and an eerie silence. The city was abandoned before the eruption. That alone is strange. It suggests a warning was heard, a panic responded to, a plan carried out, but where the people went, no one knows. Akrotiri was part of the Minoan world with its own flair. The walls of its buildings explode with color, flying fish, saffron gatherers, a boy boxing in the sunlight. The streets are paved, the houses multi-storied, the toilets flushing. This wasn't a village. It was a high-functioning urban center. And then around 1600 BCE, the volcano erupted, possibly one of the largest explosions in human history. The caldera collapsed. Tidal waves struck distant shores. Some believe the event helped doom the Minoans and may even be the kernel of truth behind the Atlantis myth. But the real question isn't what was lost. It's why Akrotiri was so prepared. Who knew what was coming, and why didn't they leave a note?
19. Dead cities of Syria, e.g., Apamea, Sergila, scattered across the Syrian countryside, half buried beneath olive groves and dry hills, lie the remains of hundreds of settlements, churches, bathhouses, villas, and workshops abandoned over 1,000 years ago. These are the so-called dead cities, though calling them cities might be generous, and calling them dead might be premature. They flourished between the 1st and 7th centuries CE, remnants of late Roman and Byzantine prosperity, but they weren't raised in war. They weren't burned down or buried by catastrophe. They were slowly emptied, house by house, like parties that ended without a fight. What they left behind is unsettling in its clarity. Basalt stone homes with intact facades, olive presses left mid-use, arched windows framing a land that no longer echoes with footsteps. Archaeologists debate why they were abandoned. Climate change, shifting trade routes, taxation gone haywire? No single answer sticks. But one theory cuts deepest. These towns thrived in a fragile balance, just urban enough to flourish, just rural enough to be vulnerable. When the economy changed or the empire's attention drifted, the balance broke. Now they sit quietly under the sun, empty yet eloquent, and they whisper a warning. You don't need fire or conquest to kill a city, just neglect. 20. Terrace tombs at Mycenae, grave circles, mask of Agamemnon. In 1876, Heinrich Schliemann struck gold again, this time in Greece at Mycenae. Inside a royal grave circle, he uncovered skeletons draped in gold, weapons, and a now famous mask. A gold funerary face he declared to be Agamemnon's. Spoiler, it wasn't, but the drama made headlines. These tombs date to around 1600 BCE, and they weren't just rich, they were telling. The Mycenaeans were early Greeks, heirs to Minoan elegance and fathers of Homeric legend. Their burial customs revealed status, power, and a taste for ostentation. Gold leaf everywhere, swords and daggers etched with lion hunts and spirals. But these weren't just warrior kings. They were also administrators, ruling from fortified hilltop palaces with archives and seal stamps. They built cyclopean walls, so massive they were credited to giants. Their influence stretched across the Aegean and beyond. Then around 1200 BCE, everything unraveled. The palaces burned, the writing ceased, and Greece fell into centuries of darkness. But the tombs remained, mute, magnificent, mistaken for myth. And if the gold mask isn't Agamemnon's, maybe that's better. Maybe the dead don't need names to leave a legacy, just questions. 21. Hattusa, Hittite capital. Tucked into the Anatolian heartland, Hattusa once stood as the capital of the Hittite Empire, one of the great Bronze Age powers, but for a long time, barely remembered. When the site was rediscovered in the early 20th century, it was little more than a ruin scattered with stones and secrets, but beneath that rubble lay the traces of a civilization that rivaled Egypt and Mesopotamia, and then seemingly vanished without fanfare. Hattusa had massive gates adorned with lions and sphinxes, sophisticated city planning, and thousands of cuneiform tablets. These texts revealed not just law codes and treaties, but international correspondence with Egyptian pharaohs, proof that the Hittites were geopolitical heavyweights. They even signed what is now considered the world's first known peace treaty with Ramses II. Then around 1200 BCE, like so many others, their cities fell. No definitive cause, just silence. The ruins remained, waiting, and when the tablets were read, the lost voice of an empire began to whisper again. It turns out history doesn't forget everything, just most of it. 22. Nabatean Petra. Petra is often called the Rose City, but its real color is contradiction. Hidden in the cliffs of southern Jordan, its monumental facades, carved straight into sandstone walls, belong to the Nabateans, a mysterious people who turned a desert trade into empire and stone into theater. For centuries, outsiders didn't even know Petra existed. Locals did, of course, but it wasn't until the 1800s that Western explorers caught wind of a lost city etched in rock, fronted by the iconic Treasury building that looks like it was designed by someone trying to impress both Roman gods and Indiana Jones. But behind the facades was more than flair. Petra had advanced water management systems, hidden cisterns, and a blend of architectural influences from Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greece, and beyond, a cultural crossroads, cleverly disguised as a mirage. Then came decline, perhaps Roman absorption, shifting trade, or earthquakes. The city faded, the silence grew. Now tourists gather for selfies, but Petra still keeps its core mystery intact. How do you carve an empire into stone and still vanish? 23. Tikal, Maya City. Deep in the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal rises like a forgotten skyline, stone pyramids piercing the canopy, temples aligned with the stars, and a city once so powerful it shaped Maya politics for centuries. But for a long time, no one knew it was there. Tikal was rediscovered in the 19th century, swallowed by rainforests but remarkably intact. At its height, it was home to tens of thousands, with plazas, palaces, and stelae carved with royal propaganda. The Maya weren't just astronomers and artisans, they were kings and warriors, playing politics with neighboring city-states in a web of alliances, betrayals, and ceremonial pageantry. The architecture stuns, but the calendars perplex. Tikal's builders track time with obsessive precision, aligning structures with celestial events down to the day. Then, sometime in the 9th century, it fell silent. The jungle took back what stone could not keep, and yet the stars Tikal followed still shine overhead, as if nothing ever changed. 24. Chichen Itza, Maya. If Tikal was a city of the stars, Chichen Itza was a city of spectacle. Located in the Yucatan, it rose to prominence centuries after Tikal, blending Maya traditions with Toltec influences. Its most famous structure, El Castillo, isn't just a pyramid, it's a calendar carved into limestone. During the equinox, a shadow falls on the steps, creating the illusion of a serpent slithering down the temple's side. Coincidence? Not a chance. Chichen Itza was designed for effect. From the great ball court, where sound travels across 500 feet with eerie clarity, to the sacred cenote, where rituals took place beneath the surface, everything was intentional. This was a city that understood performance, politics, religion, astronomy, all delivered with flair. Then it too faded. Whether due to internal conflict, drought, or migration, its grandeur collapsed, leaving behind monuments that now draw millions. But even as tourists gather beneath the serpent's shadow, the question lingers: did we decode the performance or just applaud the stage? 25. Teotihuacan. No one knows who built it. That's the first mystery. Teotihuacan, the place where the gods were created, was already in ruins when the Aztecs arrived. Towering pyramids, broad avenues, and murals painted with jaguars and feathered serpents hinted at a once mighty metropolis. At its peak, Teotihuacan was one of the largest cities in the world, with over 100,000 residents. Its grid-like layout suggests central planning, while its art and architecture suggest deep cosmological thinking. The Pyramid of the Sun, massive and stark, still dominates the landscape. The Pyramid of the Moon, ceremonial and mysterious, frames the city's sacred axis. And yet, no names survive, no royal portraits, no clear records. It's as if the city built itself. Then, around the 6th century, something shifted. The temples were burned, the elite compounds destroyed, internal revolt, social collapse, climate disaster. Teotihuacan fell and its builders were forgotten, but their stones remain, silent, geometric, unyielding, and the city, nameless still, stands as a question carved into the earth. How can something so massive leave behind so little? 26. Cahokia, Mississippian culture. Long before Europeans set foot on North American soil, Cahokia rose on the banks of the Mississippi River, just across from what is now St. Louis. At its height, around 1100 CE, it was a sprawling city of over 10,000 residents, possibly more than London at the time. Its centerpiece was Monk's Mound, a massive earthen pyramid larger at its base than Egypt's Great Pyramid. But Cahokia wasn't just a city of dirt and dreams. It was an organized, stratified society with trade routes stretching across the continent, and yet no writing, no stone monuments, just mounds, pottery, wood-hinged circles aligned with the sun, and haunting hints of a theocratic elite. Its influence is clear, but its story is incomplete. By 1400, Cahokia was abandoned, not with a bang, but a quiet dispersal. Climate, resource stress, or social fracture, take your pick. The city emptied, and the forest crept back in. Now surrounded by highways and industrial parks, Monk's Mound still looms, silent and inexplicable, a reminder that America had cities long before America had a name. And if the largest city north of Mexico could vanish so completely, how much else have we paved over? 27. Mesa Verde, cliff dwellings high in the sandstone cliffs of Colorado. Entire villages cling to the rock like memories refusing to fall. These are the cliff dwellings of the ancestral Puebloans, carefully constructed stone homes, tucked under overhangs, built between the 12th and 13th centuries. Mesa Verde, the best-known site, is both beautiful and unsettling. Hundreds of rooms, towers, and ceremonial kivas built in impossible places. But why up there? Protection, climate, spiritual retreat. Archaeologists still debate the motives. What's clear is that these were not the first homes of the Puebloans. They lived on the mesas above for centuries before descending, literally, into the cliffs, and then they left again. By 1300, the cliff dwellings were empty. No clear cause, no catastrophe, just a long, quiet migration south. Their descendants still live in the Southwest today, but the cliff homes remain as a puzzle carved into the land. It makes you wonder, how many times have we moved on without ever saying goodbye? 28. Ban Chiang, Thailand, Southeast Asia. In a quiet Thai village in the 1960s, a college student tripped over a buried pot and cracked open a lost chapter of prehistory. That accidental stumble revealed Ban Chiang, a site that would rewrite Southeast Asian history. Beneath the rice fields lay a Bronze Age culture stretching back over 5,000 years, long before anyone had expected metallurgy or complex societies in the region. The finds were staggering: red-painted ceramics, bronze tools, ornamental beads, and skeletons buried with grace and care. Evidence of early agriculture, advanced metallurgy, and long-distance trade emerged from the soil. It was a slow-burning revelation, the kind of discovery that doesn't shout but steadily reshapes timelines. Before Ban Chiang, Southeast Asia was often left out of the early civilization story. This site said otherwise. Today, much of Ban Chiang is quiet again, save for tourists and scholars. But in that quiet lies a reshaped world map, one that no longer points only west. And maybe that's the real shift. History, it turns out, is much more crowded than we thought. 29. Banpo, China. Near modern Xi'an, beneath layers of farmland and forgetfulness, lies Banpo, a Neolithic village that predates the Chinese dynasties by several millennia. Discovered in the 1950s during a construction project, Banpo revealed an organized, enclosed settlement complete with circular homes, communal storage pits, and an early sense of social planning. The site dates back around 6,000 years and is often cited as one of the earliest examples of a settled farming community in East Asia. Its most haunting features, though, are the graves, particularly those of children, often buried in painted urns with symbolic patterns. Pottery at Banpo wasn't just functional, it was expressive. Women appear to have held central roles, at least economically, based on burial goods and housing structures. A matriarchal system? Maybe. Or maybe we're just glimpsing a different version of social order, one that didn't survive the dynasties that came later. Banpo is quiet, but full of implications, because sometimes the most powerful thing a village can do is stay remembered. 30. Terracotta Army's Associated Tomb Complex. We've all seen the soldiers, the silent army of clay guarding China's first emperor, but beyond the famous ranks of the Terracotta Army lies something even more enigmatic, the rest of the tomb complex of Qin Shi Huang. Covering over 50 square kilometers, the emperor's burial site is more than a resting place. It's an underground city built for immortality. Reports from ancient texts speak of rivers of mercury, celestial ceilings, and mechanisms designed to kill intruders. Modern surveys hint that the central tomb chamber has remained sealed for over 2,000 years, deliberately untouched out of respect or fear or both. The emperor's obsession with control extended even into death. He micromanaged his afterlife like a project manager with eternity to plan. The Terracotta Army is just the front door, and yet the main chamber remains closed. No drills, no excavations, just radar and speculation. What kind of secrets stay buried because we're too afraid to open them? Sometimes the real mystery is what we've agreed not to see. 31. Göbekli Tepe's surrounding settlement evidence. At first, Göbekli Tepe was all about the mystery of isolation. Monumental pillars carved with animals and symbols, standing alone on a hill with no nearby signs of habitation. A temple without a town, a shrine with no village. It upended everything we thought we knew about how complex societies began. Spiritual life before urban life, belief before bread, but that was only the first act. More recent digs around the hill have unearthed something more mundane and just as astonishing: domestic structures, tools, animal bones, possible homes. It turns out people didn't just come here to worship, they may have lived here. The sacred and the domestic weren't separated. They were stacked together like firewood and folklore. This shifts the entire framework. Göbekli Tepe may not have been an outlier, but the centerpiece of a living, breathing Neolithic community, a place where rituals, feasts, and everyday life bled into one another. In other words, the mystery just got messier, because if belief and daily life were inseparable, then when exactly did we start drawing that line? 32. Olduvai Gorge, welcome to the Great Rift Valley, where the earth splits and time falls in. Olduvai Gorge, located in Tanzania, is one of the most important archaeological and paleoanthropological sites in the world. Here, the story of humanity's deep past has been unearthed layer by layer, literally. It was here that Mary and Louis Leakey discovered tools over 2 million years old, alongside fossils of early hominins like Homo habilis. The name means handy man, but don't let the nickname fool you. These weren't cave decorators. These were survivalists at the edge of existence, tinkering with sharp stones in a hostile world. Olduvai isn't just a site, it's a timeline. Each geological layer peels back a different version of us, different tools, different ancestors, different moments in the long improvisational play of evolution. But there's no straight line here, no neat staircase to modernity. It's a branching, broken trail full of missing pieces. So the next time someone says they've got life all figured out, remind them our origin story began in a ditch full of bones and guesses. 33. Laetoli footprints. In 1978, a team led by Mary Leakey uncovered something breathtaking in the volcanic ash of Laetoli, Tanzania. Footprints, not just any footprints, bipedal ones, two individuals walking upright,
side by side, preserved in stone for 3.6 million years. It was like catching a Polaroid of evolution mid-step. These prints weren't made by modern humans, but by early hominins, probably Australopithecus afarensis, the same species as the famous Lucy. The stride, the toe off, the arch, they all point to something walking like us long before us existed. The implications were seismic. These creatures didn't just walk, they walked together. Some say it might even have been a family. The ashfall that preserved their footprints captured a fleeting moment of life in motion, and then it was gone, like all moments, but the evidence stayed. A trail frozen in time, proof that upright walking started earlier than we thought, and maybe with more intention than instinct, because even our earliest ancestors left a trail. The question is, where was it going?
34. Denisova Cave. Deep in the cold heart of Siberia, Denisova Cave sat quietly for thousands of years, its importance unrecognized until a single finger bone changed everything. In 2008, that bone, tiny, broken, and unspectacular, was sequenced and revealed to be from a previously unknown type of ancient human, the Denisovans, not Neanderthals, not us, something else. Since then, Denisova Cave has produced teeth, tools, and even evidence of Neanderthal Denisovan hybridization. The cave wasn't just a shelter, it was a crossroads of ancient humanity. Multiple species lived here over millennia, leaving genetic fingerprints in modern populations from Siberia to Melanesia. What's most haunting is how little we know about them. No skull, no full skeleton, just fragments and DNA. But that DNA rewrote human history. The Denisovans are a reminder that we weren't alone for most of our past. Evolution was crowded, and the human family tree is more like a braided river, flowing, crossing, converging, and in the quiet darkness of that cave, the unknown still waits. 35. Lascaux, France. Discovered by a group of teenagers in 1940 after their dog chased a rabbit into a hole. Because of course it did. Lascaux wasn't just a cave, it was a cathedral of memory, painted over 17,000 years ago. Its walls explode with hundreds of animal figures, galloping horses, powerful bulls, mysterious stags. There are no battle scenes, no kings, no conquests, just life, rendered in motion and shadow. What made Lascaux extraordinary wasn't just the art itself, it was the realization that people so ancient, so primitive by modern standards, had already mastered the visual language of movement, scale, and imagination. They didn't just record what they saw, they interpreted it. Why these images were painted remains an open question. Ritual, education, a long-forgotten hunt story told with color instead of words, and then, ironically, modern discovery became the cave's greatest threat. Within a few decades of opening to the public, human breath and microbes began to damage the artwork. The site was closed, a replica was built, the original remains sealed off, preserved from the very curiosity that uncovered it. But the echoes remain. We still gaze into the dark to see what our ancestors were trying to show us, and in those flickers of ochre and charcoal, maybe we see ourselves.
36. Chauvet Cave. Hidden behind a rock slide in southern France for tens of thousands of years, Chauvet Cave remained undisturbed until 1994 when three explorers stumbled into an ancient art gallery. What they found wasn't crude doodles. It was a masterclass in Paleolithic imagination. Lions, rhinos, horses, mammoths, painted in motion, shaded with charcoal and ochre, some even using the bulges of the cave wall to create a 3D illusion. And the age? At least 30,000 years old, twice as old as most famous cave art. The level of sophistication is staggering. These weren't primitive sketches, they were symbolic, purposeful, emotional. But what were they for? Ritual? Storytelling? Magic? No one agrees. The cave was sealed shortly after its creation, as if its message was meant to be buried. Today, Chauvet remains closed to the public. Only a replica is accessible, so the real images don't fade under human breath. And that raises an unsettling idea. Maybe art was never meant to last, but the mystery, that always does. 37. Tomb of Cyrus the Great, Pasargadae, Persia, Iran. In the dry plains of modern Iran, a lone stone monument rises, a stepped tomb, elegant in its simplicity. This is the final resting place of Cyrus the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Empire. No towering obelisks, no intimidating colossus, just clean lines and calm stone, fitting perhaps for a ruler whose legacy was not just conquest, but tolerance. Cyrus was a rare breed, a conqueror remembered for mercy. His edicts allowed exiled peoples to return home, including the Jews of Babylon. He stitched together an empire across 3 continents, one of the largest in ancient history, not just with swords, but with roads, satraps, and respect for local customs. And then the silence. The tomb stood forgotten, plundered, even repurposed during later empires. Alexander the Great reportedly visited it with reverence, but centuries wore away the memory. Now Pasargadae lies quiet again, a humble tomb, a vast legacy, and the quiet suggestion that sometimes the most enduring empires are the ones that choose restraint.
38. Persepolis, Iran, Achaemenid capital. Persepolis was never meant to be subtle. Carved into a mountainside, its grand staircases, towering columns, and intricate reliefs speak the language of empire in full volume. Founded by Darius the Great around 518 BCE, this was no ordinary capital. It was a ceremonial stage for the Achaemenid rulers to showcase their world. The city wasn't built for the day-to-day grind. It was for Nowruz festivals, royal audiences, and the kind of diplomacy that involves a lot of gold and very little compromise. Delegations from across the empire, Egyptians, Babylonians, Medes, Greeks, are depicted on the reliefs bearing tribute, their clothing rendered in painstaking detail. And then came Alexander. In 330 BCE, after conquering Persia, he reportedly burned Persepolis, perhaps in revenge, perhaps in a drunken impulse. Either way, the fire preserved what time might have taken longer to erase. Today, the ruins stand like a stage after the actors have gone. The empire is gone, but the script, carved in stone, remains. 39. Sutton Hoo Ship Burial, England. In 1939, just as Europe was preparing to descend into war, a quieter battle unfolded in a Suffolk field. There, beneath a grassy mound, archaeologists uncovered one of the most spectacular early medieval graves ever found, a full-sized ship burial packed with treasures and mystery. No body remained. Acidic soil had erased it, but the clues were enough. A ceremonial helmet, Byzantine silverware, a sword, a lyre, gold fittings. The grave pointed to a high-status Anglo-Saxon figure, possibly King Radwald, who ruled in the 7th century. Sutton Hoo shattered the idea that the so-called Dark Ages were culturally stagnant. It revealed a world of craftsmanship, diplomacy, and layered symbolism, a world more complex than the cliches. But what lingers most is the silence of the ship, buried in earth, made to sail in spirit. It was a monument to both prestige and impermanence, and like the best graves, it buried its owner and raised bigger questions. How much history lies just inches beneath the lawn? 40. Nimrud and Nineveh palaces, Assyrian capitals, Iraq. In the 19th century, Western explorers arrived in northern Iraq and stumbled upon ruins so vast they were first mistaken for natural hills. These were the palaces of Nimrud and Nineveh, capitals of the Assyrian Empire, once feared and forgotten. Beneath the dust were colossal winged bulls, endless stone reliefs, and libraries of cuneiform texts. The Assyrians weren't subtle. Their palace walls depicted siege warfare, lion hunts, and tributes rendered in visceral precision. These weren't just decorations, they were propaganda in stone, a permanent flex. Ashurnasirpal II, Sennacherib, and Ashurbanipal ruled with a mix of administration and intimidation. Their cities were marvels of engineering, their armies relentless. And yet it all crumbled. By the 7th century BCE, Nineveh was sacked, the empire fractured, and the world forgot until the spades arrived. Now the palaces are museum pieces, ruins, and occasionally targets of modern conflict, because even the most powerful cities can become buried headlines. 41. Uruk, Warka, Iraq. Before Babylon, before Nineveh, there was Uruk. One of the first true cities in human history, Uruk thrived over 5,000 years ago in southern Mesopotamia. Its rise marked the dawn of urban life, walls enclosing not just people but politics, writing, and myth. This was the city of Gilgamesh, king, demigod, and literary pioneer. It's also where the earliest forms of writing, cuneiform, emerged, pressed into clay tablets by the styluses of Sumerian scribes. Uruk had ziggurats towering above the plain, organized bureaucracies, and temples that managed the economy. It wasn't just a city, it was an idea that people could build something bigger than themselves and then govern it. But like all early experiments, Uruk faded, rivers shifted, trade declined, empires rose elsewhere. Still, the city's echo remains. Every time a contract is signed, a myth is told, or a wall goes up around a capital, you're hearing an Uruk whisper. Not bad for a place most maps don't bother to mark. 42. Mari, Syria. Mari wasn't a capital in the way we think of capitals today. It was a Bronze Age nerve center, a crossroads of trade, language, diplomacy, and religion, sitting along the Euphrates River in what is now Syria. When archaeologists began excavating the site in the 1930s, they uncovered a palace so vast and complex it took years to map. Over 300 rooms, ceremonial halls, storage chambers, and one of the earliest known royal archives. Those cuneiform tablets changed everything. Letters from kings, treaties, court gossip, even administrative memos gave us a glimpse into the daily machinery of ancient power. Here was a city-state that negotiated, deceived, flattered, and feared. An empire so on the edge of empires, trying to survive by knowing everyone else's business. The art was rich, the bureaucracy even richer, and yet Mari was destroyed, burned and forgotten. The tablets survived. Sometimes history survives not through monuments or myths, but because someone bothered to take notes. 43. Ebla, Tel Marduk, Syria. When a tractor accidentally struck something hard in the fields near Tel Marduk in 1964, it was the start of a dig that would yield one of the largest caches of cuneiform tablets ever found, over 17,000 of them. They belonged to the ancient city of Ebla, a Bronze Age powerhouse that few had ever heard of. The Ebla tablets shattered existing chronologies. They listed kings, cities, and trade routes long assumed to be legend or simply misplaced in time. They showed that Ebla was not just a minor player, but a sophisticated urban center deeply embedded in the web of Near Eastern diplomacy around 2500 BCE. Its language, an early Semitic dialect, its politics, nuanced, its rise, meteoric, its fall, violent. But what remains most startling is the preservation of memory. These tablets remembered what history forgot. They offer a rare, articulate voice from the deep past, one that didn't survive through monuments or empires, but through clay and context. And for once, the dirt told the truth. 44. Chayonu, Anatolia, Turkey. Before there were cities, before temples, before monumental architecture, there was Chayonu, a Neolithic settlement nestled in southeastern Anatolia that quietly rewrote the story of human settlement. Dating back to around 8000 BCE, it offered early evidence of agriculture, animal domestication, and communal architecture. What makes Chayonu stand out isn't just its age, but its innovation. Rectangular buildings arranged in patterns, stone and mud brick construction, evidence of copper working centuries before the so-called Copper Age. It's one of the first places where people stopped wandering and started organizing. Then there's the so-called skull building, a structure filled with human remains, perhaps a ritual site or an early form of ancestor veneration. Interpretations vary wildly, but one thing is clear. This was not a primitive campsite. It was a community. Sayonu sits at the blurry edge of prehistory and history, where people first tried the risky experiment of living together and left just enough evidence to make us wonder how they pulled it off. 45. Nok culture terracotta, Nigeria. In the hills of central Nigeria, farmers digging for tin in the 20th century stumbled across something unexpected. Terracotta heads, stylized, expressive, almost haunting. They were fragments of the Nok culture, a civilization that flourished between 1000 BCE and 300 CE, and one that was virtually unknown until those accidental finds. The sculptures vary in size and form, but all share a sophisticated aesthetic: almond-shaped eyes, intricate hairstyles, delicate detailing. These weren't just decorations, they were part of a cultural system we barely understand. Very little architecture has been found, and the writing, if there ever was any, has not survived. What we do know is that Nok people were among the earliest in sub-Saharan Africa to smelt iron, and their art suggests a rich symbolic world. But as with so many discoveries, the more we learn, the more questions we raise. Who were they? Where did they go? Why did they leave so little behind except perfection in clay? 46. Great Zimbabwe. Rising from the highlands of southern Africa, Great Zimbabwe is a ruin with a name that echoes power. Its massive stone walls, some over 5 meters high and built without mortar, curve across the landscape in deliberate, elegant enclosures. For centuries, locals knew of the site, but when European explorers discovered it in the 19th century, they couldn't believe Africans had built it, so they claimed someone else must have. Phoenicians, Arabs, anyone but the people who actually lived there. That myth has since crumbled, like the colonial illusions that fueled it. Great Zimbabwe flourished from the 11th to 15th centuries, controlling trade routes and exporting gold, ivory, and goods across the Indian Ocean. Its architecture wasn't random. It was symbolic, structured, and spatially complex. A statement of identity as much as utility. The ruins remain, weathered but imposing, not as relics of a forgotten past, but as evidence of a narrative long denied and finally reclaimed. Because sometimes the biggest discovery isn't the structure, it's who you allow to have built it. 47. Palenque, Maya, Mexico. In the dense jungle of Chiapas, Mexico, lies the ancient Maya city of Palenque, a place where stone architecture met cosmic ambition. Long overgrown and nearly lost to time, Palenque was rediscovered in the 18th century, and ever since it's been peeling back the layers of Maya genius. Its temples aren't just buildings, they're texts. Its walls speak in glyphs. Among the most significant finds was the Temple of the Inscriptions, a stepped pyramid housing the tomb of Pakal the Great, one of the longest reigning Maya rulers. His sarcophagus lid, covered in elaborate iconography, has become iconic, misinterpreted by some as a spaceship cockpit, but in reality a stunning depiction of Maya cosmology, death, and rebirth. Palenque's hieroglyphs helped scholars crack the Maya writing system, making it one of the key Rosetta Stones of Mesoamerica. Its artwork and architecture whisper of a civilization both scientific and spiritual, mathematical and mystical, and yet for all its brilliance, Palenque was eventually swallowed by the jungle until someone thought to listen to the trees. 48. Copan, Maya, Honduras. If Palenque was elegance, Copan was detail. Nestled in the highlands of Honduras, Copan was a major classic Maya city, known for its intricate stelae, dynastic history, and remarkable stone artistry. Its rulers weren't just leaders, they were storytellers, inscribing their legacy into every surface available. The hieroglyphic stairway at Copan is one of the longest known Maya texts, carved into the steps of a grand temple, over 2,000 glyphs chronicling royal succession, battles, alliances, and cosmic events. Walking up it is like ascending a history book written in stone. But Copan wasn't just about royalty. Archaeological finds revealed neighborhoods, ball courts, and even evidence of a complex class system. It was a city of depth, socially, spiritually, and politically. By the 9th century, Copan declined, much like its fellow Maya cities. The elite vanished, the texts stopped, and the jungle moved in. But the carvings still stand, because when words are etched in stone, silence doesn't come easy. 49. Tiwanaku, Bolivia. High in the Bolivian Andes, near the southern shores of Lake Titicaca, lie the ruins of Tiwanaku, an ancient city shrouded in silence, mystery, and thin mountain air. Unlike the Inca, who came later, the Tiwanaku left no written records, but they left structures, megalithic temples, precisely cut stones, and monuments aligned with solstices and stars. The most iconic piece is the Gateway of the Sun, a massive stone arch carved from a single slab, its surface decorated with cosmological figures, including a central godlike figure with rays emanating from his head. The site suggests astronomical knowledge, urban planning, and a ritual life deeply rooted in both earth and sky. At its peak around 800 CE, Tiwanaku influenced much of the southern Andes, serving as a cultural and spiritual hub, and then by 1000 CE, it faded. Drought, political collapse? We still don't know. What remains is a city built with intent and a mystery chiseled into the Altiplano. 50. Nazca and Paracas cultures, Peru. Long before the Inca, the southern coast of Peru was home to two cultures that left behind some of the most puzzling and beautiful remnants in South America, the Paracas and the Nazca. The Paracas are known for their incredibly intricate textiles, woven with patterns so fine they still confound modern reproduction. Burials from this culture included these cloths wrapped around the dead in elaborate bundles, suggesting a spiritual function as well as a practical one. These weren't just garments, they were woven beliefs. Later came the Nazca, best known for the massive geoglyphs, lines etched into the desert that form animals, geometric shapes, and long arrow-straight paths visible only from the air. We still debate their purpose: ceremonial walkways, astronomical calendars, messages to the gods. Together, these cultures reveal a worldview where the land itself became a canvas, stitched or carved into meaning. They didn't build empires, they built symbols. And symbols, it turns out, are harder to bury. 51. Tiwanaku, Wari, Inca highland complexes. The Andes weren't home to a single ancient civilization. They were a ladder of empires. Before the Inca rose to power, the highlands were shaped by Tiwanaku in the south and Wari in the north, each creating vast networks of roads, infrastructure, and cultural influence. Wari, often overshadowed by its more famous successors, laid the groundwork for centralized administration. They built planned cities with orthogonal layouts and invented storage systems for grain, elements the Inca later perfected. Tiwanaku, as already mentioned, provided the spiritual and architectural foundations. Together, they were the dry run for what would become the Inca Empire. When the Inca did emerge, they inherited a world already mapped out in stone and trade routes. They connected and codified it, extending roads, building fortresses, and integrating the old with the new. What we think of as uniquely Inca was often inherited. And sometimes the greatest power doesn't come from creating,
It comes from knowing how to inherit wisely.
52. Pazyryk burials, Altai, Siberia. High in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, beneath layers of permafrost and frozen soil, lay the graves of the Pazyryk people, nomadic horse riders who left behind one of the most haunting windows into Iron Age life. When these tombs were opened in the 20th century, what emerged wasn't just skeletons, but entire personalities. Woolen garments, saddles, tattooed skin preserved by ice, and even felt boots, the Pazyryk kurgans offered some of the most detailed snapshots of ancient steppe life ever discovered. Horses were buried with their riders, sometimes with elaborately crafted masks and ornate bridles, revealing the depth of cultural ritual attached to these animals. And then there were the textiles, geometric patterns, fantastical creatures, and carpets that survived millennia of snow. What these tombs tell us is that nomadic life was never simple. It was rich, spiritual, and carefully choreographed, a mobile civilization that didn't leave cities but carried its culture across the horizon, proof that even in the coldest places, history refuses to stay buried. 53. King Tut's funerary mask and associated treasures. If you had to pick one image to represent ancient Egypt, it would probably be this, the golden death mask of Tutankhamun, eyes outlined in lapis lazuli, its expression frozen in divine serenity. It's more than an artifact, it's iconography. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, what he found wasn't just wealth, it was a complete storybook of a royal afterlife. Chariots, jewelry, weapons, cosmetics, even food offerings, but nothing captured the imagination like the mask. It wasn't just art, it was ideology. The boy king reborn as Osiris, his face now the eternal face of a god, made of solid gold and inlaid with semi-precious stones. The mask was buried over the mummy's head and shoulders. Its craftsmanship still puzzles experts, and its fame unmatched. Ironically, Tut was a minor pharaoh, but his tomb escaped looting, and in doing so, reshaped the global image of Egypt. Sometimes immortality isn't earned through greatness, but through accident and preservation. 54. The Find of the Iceman, Ötzi, Alps, Europe. In 1991, two hikers in the Ötztal Alps, near the Austrian-Italian border, came across what looked like a discarded mannequin. What they'd actually found was a time traveler, frozen not in fiction, but in ice. Nicknamed Ötzi, the Iceman had been entombed in a glacier for over 5,000 years, preserved so perfectly that his skin, clothes, tools, and even his last meal were intact. He wasn't buried, he wasn't ritually prepared. He fell or was left where he died, high in the mountains, clutching a copper axe, wearing a cloak of woven grass, shoes stuffed with straw. His body offered more detail about Neolithic European life than any museum ever had. Tattoos marked his joints, pollen and wheat traces revealed seasonal movement, stomach contents revealed his last meals, even his arteries hinted at heart disease. But his story isn't simple. He was wounded, he carried a weapon. His death? Still debated. A man caught mid-moment and then forgotten for millennia. Ötzi wasn't royalty. He wasn't a king or a priest. He was ordinary, and maybe that's what makes him extraordinary, because sometimes it's the life that wasn't meant to be remembered that ends up rewriting the past. 55. Rosetta Stone's stone siblings, other bilingual inscriptions. The Rosetta Stone gets all the attention, but it wasn't alone. Across the ancient world, bilingual and sometimes trilingual inscriptions served as the bridge between empires, cultures, and scripts. Think of them as the ancient world's multilingual instruction manuals or diplomatic cheat sheets. From the Canopus Decree to the trilingual inscriptions of Behistun and Philae,
These stones allowed scholars to cross-reference known languages with mysterious ones. They're the quiet workhorses of epigraphy, allowing us to read dead languages, trace imperial propaganda, and understand how cultures translated not just words, but worldviews. The Rosetta Stone unlocked hieroglyphs, yes, but its lesser-known siblings filled in the gaps. Together, they taught us how ancient scribes thought, flattered rulers, and recorded their histories in layers of redundancy. Each stone is a puzzle piece, and sometimes the loudest revelation comes from the quietest copy, because translation is more than words, it's memory in disguise.
56. The Sphinx and Great Pyramids, Giza Plateau, Egypt. The Giza Plateau is the postcard of ancient mystery. The pyramids, especially Khufu's Great Pyramid, stand as jaw-dropping feats of engineering, mathematics, and ambition, and in front of them, the Great Sphinx sits like a riddle no one can quite solve, half lion, half man, fully inscrutable. Built around 2500 BCE, we think, the Sphinx's origins are still debated. Was it Khafre's portrait? Was it older? Why was it carved directly from bedrock while everything else was built up? And the pyramids, we know how they were probably built. Quarries, ramps, teams of skilled laborers, not aliens. But even with that knowledge, the sheer scale refuses to be demystified. Over 2 million limestone blocks, each placed with absurd precision. Burial monuments, yes, but also power made permanent. Yet for all the awe, Giza was never meant to be silent. These structures were part of a whole sacred complex, temples, causeways, rituals, a city of the dead that was once full of life, and it still whispers.
57. The Valley of the King's Tombs. Other than Tutankhamun, Tutankhamun's tomb may be the celebrity, but it's just one chamber in the vast necropolis known as the Valley of the Kings. Nestled into the desert cliffs near Luxor, this royal cemetery hides over 60 tombs carved into rock, each a portal to the afterlife designed with elaborate precision. Here rest pharaohs like Ramses II, Seti I, and Hatshepsut. Their tombs are deeper, more complex, and often more beautifully decorated than Tut's. Walls glow with scenes from the Book of the Dead, ceilings painted with star charts and protective deities. These were not graves, they were metaphysical blueprints for eternity. But many were looted, their treasures lost, their names forgotten, until modern excavation pieced the fragments back together. Still, some remain untouched. Others lie hidden, possibly buried beneath debris or time itself. Every new find is a reminder. For every tomb we've uncovered, another may lie inches away, watching, waiting, unopened.
58. Amarna, Akhetaten, Egypt. For a brief moment in the 14th century BCE, Egypt was turned upside down, not by invasion, but by ideology. Pharaoh Akhenaten abandoned the pantheon, shuttered temples, and declared devotion to a single sun disk, Aten. He built a new capital, Amarna, from scratch, an architectural break from tradition, and a political experiment with short-lived success. The city was unlike any in Egypt. Its art softened, elongated figures, intimate family scenes, a pharaoh shown not as a god, but as a man in motion. Temples were open air, bathed in sunlight rather than shadow. Bureaucracy moved quickly for a while. After Akhenaten's death, the city was abandoned, his reforms reversed, his name nearly erased. Amarna became a ghost city, buried and forgotten until its rediscovery. What remains is an architectural snapshot of radical belief, beautifully preserved and deeply controversial, and in its ruins, a question about how long new ideas are allowed to live.
59. Zapotec, Olmec sites in Mesoamerica. Before the Maya and the Aztecs, there were the Olmec and the Zapotec, two foundational civilizations that carved their presence into the jungles and highlands of Mesoamerica. The Olmec, often dubbed the Mother Culture, are best known for their colossal stone heads, some over 10 feet tall, carved from basalt, and staring with expressions that still defy interpretation. Olmec sites like San Lorenzo and La Venta featured complex urban layouts, ceremonial centers, and strange iconography, jaguars, baby-faced figurines, and what some argue are the earliest hints of writing in the Americas. Meanwhile, the Zapotec civilization centered at Monte Alban developed early hieroglyphic scripts, planned cities on mountaintops, and constructed tombs filled with jewelry, urns, and painted murals. They were astronomers, builders, and administrators, shaping a civilization with endurance. These sites show that Mesoamerica didn't begin with empire, it began with experimentation, symbolism, and regional innovation. The roots run deeper than most maps admit.
60. Chavin de Huantar, Peru. Hidden in the highlands of the Peruvian Andes, Chavin de Huantar isn't grand in scale, but it's massive in meaning. Dating back to at least 1200 BCE, it was the ceremonial center of the Chavin culture, one of the earliest and most influential civilizations in the Andes. But instead of pyramids or palaces, what Chavin offers is psychology. The site's architecture channels visitors through dark, labyrinthine passageways where priests may have used sound, light, and hallucinogenic rituals to create disorienting religious experiences. In the heart of the temple stands the Lanzon, an eerie, fanged stone deity blending feline, human, and serpent traits. It's not just a statue, it's an ideology made physical. Chavin wasn't a military empire, it was a belief system. Its iconography spread throughout the Andes, suggesting that its influence came through spiritual persuasion, not conquest. Sometimes the most powerful structures are built in the mind first. 61. Corral, Peru. Older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, Corral sits quietly on a desert plateau near the Supe River in Peru. At nearly 5,000 years old, it's considered the oldest known city in the Americas, and yet it lay forgotten until the 1990s, buried in plain sight. Corral has no defensive walls, no weapons, no violent imagery. What it does have is pyramids, plazas, ceremonial platforms, musical instruments, and carefully planned urban design. Its people engineered irrigation, cultivated cotton, and traded with distant regions without apparent hierarchy or warfare. This city reshapes our understanding of early civilization. It suggests that complex urban life didn't always begin with kings and soldiers. It could begin with trade, ceremony, and shared infrastructure. Corral's silence is what makes it so loud. It whispers of a civilization that thrived without tyranny, where architecture and music, not conquest, laid the foundation for a city. 62. Tiwanaku, again, and Pucara, Wari, etc. The Andes were never ruled by a single cultural thread. Long before the rise of the Inca, a tapestry of overlapping civilizations, Tiwanaku, Pucara, Wari, and others carved power into stone, mountain, and myth. Tiwanaku, previously mentioned, remained an architectural enigma, but its influence bled into the highlands through sites like Pucara, a religious center with distinctive pottery and sculpture, bridging local tradition with broader ideological networks. Then came the Wari, with administrative centers stretching across modern Peru. Wari built road systems, terraced agriculture, and orthogonal city planning that eerily prefigured Inca strategies centuries later. Their cities were high-altitude marvels of geometry and control. What ties them together isn't empire, but influence. They weren't unified, but they were connected. And each site adds a new thread to the Andean story, a story not of a single ascent, but of many peaks rising and falling in layered silence. 63. Monte Alban, Zapotec, Mexico. Perched atop a mountain ridge in Oaxaca, Monte Alban was a city that didn't grow organically, it was imposed. Around 500 BCE, the Zapotecs flattened a mountaintop and built a planned urban center at the cloud's edge. Temples, ball courts, tombs, observatories. This was a city designed for visibility and permanence. Monte Alban wasn't just political, it was cosmic. Its orientation aligned with celestial bodies, and its architecture echoed ritual purposes. One of its most enigmatic features is the danzantes stones, carvings of contorted human figures that may depict ritual sacrifice or perhaps fallen enemies. No one knows for sure. For over 1,000 years, Monte Alban was a hub of Zapotec civilization. It saw alliances, wars, reinventions, and eventually decline, but it never quite disappeared. Its ruins remained visible, an open message in stone from a people who understood how to carve permanence into impermanence.
64. Tomb of Qin Shi Huang, beyond the Terracotta Army. We know the Terracotta Army. Rows upon rows of clay soldiers discovered in 1974 guarding the tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. But what they guard is what we haven't seen. The actual tomb of the emperor, an enormous underground chamber said to contain rivers of mercury and a ceiling studded with stars, remains sealed. Ancient texts describe mechanical traps and celestial maps, and modern surveys have confirmed unusually high mercury levels in the soil, but no one's dared open it. Why? Preservation, risk, and possibly fear of damaging something irreplaceable. This isn't just a burial site, it's a myth incubator. The emperor who united China, standardized currency, script, and measurements, attempted to conquer mortality too. His tomb remains untouched, an unopened book from the founding chapter of a civilization, and in a way, its silence has become louder than any excavation ever could.
65. Great Library of Alexandria, Site and Related Finds. The Great Library of Alexandria is more myth than monument. We've never truly found it. No grand hall of scrolls has emerged from the soil, no definitive architectural blueprint recovered, and yet its idea looms over all of human history as both a beacon of knowledge and a cautionary tale of loss. Built in the 3rd century BCE under the Ptolemaic dynasty, the library supposedly held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, science, philosophy, poetry, and politics collected from across the known world. Ships docking in Alexandria had their texts confiscated and copied. The originals stayed. It was aggressive enlightenment, but over time, the library suffered. Fire, neglect, political turmoil, and possibly multiple destructions. Today, we piece it together through ruins nearby, scattered references, and finds like the Serapeum, a secondary temple complex that may have housed part of the collection. What we haven't found is the true heart of the library, and perhaps that's the point. A lost library reminds us that knowledge is fragile, even when written in ink and ambition. 6. Herculaneum Scrolls, Villa of the Papyri. If the Library of Alexandria was lost to fire, Herculaneum's library was preserved by it. Buried under volcanic ash in 79 CE alongside Pompeii, the Villa of the Papyri contained hundreds of tightly packed scrolls, carbonized by heat but remarkably intact. For centuries, they were unreadable. The scrolls crumbled at the touch. But modern technology, multispectral imaging, X-ray tomography, has begun to unwrap them virtually and carefully, revealing philosophical texts, many in Greek, some likely unknown to modern scholars. The villa itself was luxurious, likely belonging to a Roman statesman. Its private library was a cultural time capsule, locked for nearly 2,000 years. What we've deciphered so far includes works from Epicurean philosophers, but many scrolls remain unread, their secrets rolled tight in burnt papyrus. The paradox? These texts survived because of disaster. What was nearly destroyed is now one of our most promising literary recoveries, and perhaps the next great rediscovery is already waiting, trapped in a roll of ash.
67. Akhenaten's tombs, A10 temples. Akhenaten didn't just build a new religion, He built a new city, a new art style, and a new cosmic order. But he also built tombs and temples unlike anything Egypt had seen before. His Aten temples, found at sites like Amarna, Luxor, and Karnak, broke from the dark, enclosed sanctuaries of earlier Egyptian design. These were open air complexes, flooded with sunlight, built to worship the sun disk directly. They emphasized light over secrecy, clarity over shadow. His tomb, located near Amarna, was carved deep into cliffs and decorated with scenes of royal mourning and familial affection. Notably absent, traditional gods. Akhenaten replaced the pantheon with the Aten, and himself as its chosen voice. But after his death, the backlash was swift. Temples were smashed, names erased, tombs abandoned. Akhenaten's legacy became a historical glitch, sandwiched between more traditional rulers, and yet his stones remain, reminders that even heresy can be carved in rock.
68. The finds at Luxor Lost Golden City, Rise of Aten. In 2021, archaeologists near Luxor announced the discovery of something astonishing, a sprawling urban site dubbed the Lost Golden City, or Rise of Aten, dating back to the reign of Amenhotep III, father of Akhenaten. What they found wasn't a temple or a tomb, but a city. Streets lined with brick houses, administrative buildings, pottery workshops, and even a bakery district. Walls still stood shoulder high. Tools lay as they were left. It was as if life had paused mid-step. This city offers a rare window into daily life during a transformative period in Egypt's history, right before the religious upheaval of the Amarna period. It may have been repurposed by Akhenaten, then abandoned when he moved the capital. Unlike the usual finds focused on kings and gods, this was about ordinary life. Administrators, artisans, bakers. Sometimes it's the cities of the living, not the tombs of the dead, that speak loudest. 69. Saqqara Discoveries. Saqqara isn't one discovery, it's a living excavation. For over 4,000 years, this vast necropolis near Cairo has served as Egypt's eternal waiting room. From Old Kingdom pyramids to New Kingdom tombs to Greco-Roman mummies, Saqqara is a vertical stack of history. Recent discoveries have only deepened the mystery. Dozens of sealed coffins, perfectly preserved, have been unearthed in painted shafts. Some date back over 2,500 years and still bear vivid colors and inscriptions. Animal mummies, cats, crocodiles, even lion cubs have turned up, suggesting complex ritual practices. Temples, burial shafts, and scrolls continue to emerge, revealing that Saqqara wasn't just a cemetery, it was a spiritual ecosystem. The famous step pyramid of Djoser, one of the earliest colossal stone structures, still towers over the chaos. And underneath it all, layers still untouched. In Saqqara, the past doesn't lie dormant, it keeps interrupting the present.
70. Valley of the Kings, recently discovered tombs, e.g., possible tomb of Thutmose II. The Valley of the Kings has given up many of its secrets, but it hasn't finished speaking. In recent years, new tombs, previously hidden beneath rubble or tucked behind overlooked corridors, have come to light. Among them is a tantalizing candidate, the possible tomb of Thutmose II, a pharaoh whose life was overshadowed by his wife, Hatshepsut, and whose death remains historically foggy. Archaeologists have uncovered fragments of burial goods, remnants of gold leaf, and unfinished chambers that suggest royal intent. Though the identity remains unconfirmed, the architecture hints at a tomb designed for a king but interrupted by time, politics, or both. These modern discoveries in an ancient necropolis remind us that the valley isn't a closed book. It's a living archive of pharaohs, shifting power, and ritual obsession with eternity. Every new find is both a revelation and a reminder. Even in well-trodden ground, history hides in plain sight. 71. Underwater structures, submerged monument. Beneath the Sea of Galilee, beneath the quiet waters of the Sea of Galilee, lies a mystery, a massive cone-shaped structure made of basalt boulders. Discovered by sonar in 2003, this submerged monument measures about 70 meters across and rises 10 meters high. It's older than the biblical period, possibly over 4,000 years old, and no one knows who built it or why. The stones weren't naturally placed. They were arranged intentionally, suggesting significant effort and planning. Was it a burial mound, a ritual center, a navigational marker for an ancient shoreline long since lost to time? Because it's underwater, excavation is difficult and ongoing. The structure challenges our assumptions about prehistoric construction in the region. It's not a grand temple or a known city, just a shape on the seafloor, holding tight to its silence. Sometimes what we can't see from land is what reshapes the map the most. 72. LiDAR mapping, revealing hidden cities, Mesoamerica, Amazon, SE Asia. The jungle hides everything until you look at it with lasers. In recent years, LiDAR, light detection, and ranging technology has revolutionized archaeology by peeling back the forest canopy and revealing what the trees have kept secret for centuries. Vast, forgotten cities sprawled beneath the green. In Guatemala, LiDAR scans revealed that the Maya lowlands were far more urbanized than anyone imagined. Tens of thousands of structures, causeways, and irrigation systems hidden just beneath the foliage. In the Amazon, similar scans uncovered geometric earthworks and urban planning that challenged the myth of untouched wilderness. And in Cambodia, LiDAR revealed the full sprawl of Angkor, complete with water management systems and suburbs. These aren't just ruins, they're civilizations hiding in plain sight, preserved by neglect and protected by terrain. It turns out that sometimes the best archaeologist isn't a trowel, it's a laser in a plane, and it changes everything we thought we knew. 73. Cave and rock art sites across Africa, e.g., Blombos Cave, Apollo 11 Cave. Long before temples and cities, humans spoke through symbols, and some of their earliest conversations are preserved on the rock walls of Africa. In South Africa's Blombos Cave, archaeologists uncovered a 75,000-year-old piece of ochre marked with crosshatch patterns, considered one of the earliest known examples of abstract design. Not far behind, the Apollo 11 cave in Namibia revealed stone slabs with painted animal figures dated to over 25,000 years ago. These markings may look simple, but their implications are profound. They suggest symbolic thinking, intentionality, and the beginnings of what we call culture. These weren't just decorations, they were ideas, beliefs, memories encoded in pigment and stone. Africa's rock art sites stretch across the continent: Tassili N'Ajjer, Drakensberg, Kondoa, each one offering different styles and subjects. Herds of cattle, dancing figures, geometric shapes. Together they whisper an ancient truth. Long before we wrote history, we painted it.
74. Shigur Idol, Russia. In the bogs of the Ural Mountains, a wooden statue lay hidden for over 9,000 years. When it was unearthed in the late 19th century, the Shigur idol shocked the archaeological world, not just for its age, twice as old as the Egyptian pyramids, but for its complexity. Carved from a single larch tree, the idol stands over 5 meters tall. Its surface is covered in geometric patterns, faces, and symbolic motifs. It is by far the oldest known monumental wooden sculpture in the world, and we still don't know what it means. Was it religious, a totem, a warning? Its style is so ancient, it predates known writing systems, and yet it feels intentional, designed to communicate something vital across millennia. Preserved only because of the peat bog's oxygen-starved conditions, the Shigur idol is a fragile survivor from a forgotten world. Sometimes the message outlives the language.
70. The Glozell Tablets, France. In 1924, a teenager plowing a field near Glozell, France, unearthed a stone-lined chamber containing bones, pottery, and what would soon ignite one of archaeology's most heated controversies, inscribed tablets bearing mysterious symbols. These so-called Glozell tablets featured writing no one could read in a script that resembled nothing on record. Were they prehistoric, medieval, modern forgeries? Scholars were divided for decades. Some saw in them a revolutionary discovery, evidence of a forgotten European script. Others dismissed the site entirely, accusing its discoverers of fraud. Radiocarbon dating yielded conflicting results. Debates flared, reputations were ruined, and the mystery deepened. Today, the Glozell artifacts remain in a strange limbo, too contested for consensus, too compelling to ignore. Whether authentic or not, they serve as a case study in how archaeology is shaped not just by evidence, but by belief, ego, and the uneasy politics of the unknown. 76. Göbekli Tepe's surrounding satellite monuments. Göbekli Tepe may have shocked the world, but it's no longer an isolated marvel. As archaeologists widened their scope, they discovered a constellation of similar megalithic sites scattered across the same region: Karahan Tepe, Navalu Chori, Sefer Tepe, and others. These satellite monuments suggest that Göbekli wasn't a one-off. It was part of a cultural complex much larger and older than anyone anticipated. Karahan Tepe, for instance, features T-shaped pillars and carved enclosures similar to Göbekli's, but with different layouts and possibly even older construction. These sites hint at a network of ritual centers built by mobile communities that shared architectural ideas and religious concepts. It wasn't just one hill, one moment, one anomaly. It was a civilization hiding in prehistory. This wider context reframes Göbekli Tepe, not as the birthplace of sacred architecture, but as the most famous node in an ancient spiritual web that once lit up the Anatolian highlands.
77. Tephra preserved sites, e.g., Santorini, Thera eruption layers. Sometimes it's destruction that preserves. Across the ancient world, layers of volcanic ash, called tephra, have sealed moments in time with almost photographic clarity. The most famous of these is the Thera eruption, which buried the Aegean island of Santorini, ancient Thera, in the 2nd millennium BCE, but its effects were far-reaching. Akrotiri, a Minoan city on the island, was preserved in astonishing detail. Plaster walls, furniture, pottery, even painted frescoes frozen beneath meters of ash. Beyond Santorini, the eruption's ash layer sits like a timestamp, linking sites across the Mediterranean and allowing archaeologists to synchronize distant chronologies. It's geological forensics. By identifying the chemical fingerprint of tephra in different places, we can connect otherwise unrelated ruins to a single moment of cataclysm. The irony is sharp. A volcanic apocalypse meant to erase instead became archaeology's most reliable bookmark. Time, it seems, sometimes leaves its own footnotes, written in ash. 78. Celtic Latin culture, sites in Europe. Across Iron Age Europe, from France to Switzerland to Eastern Europe, the Latin culture left behind a trail of elegant metalwork, fortified settlements, and enigmatic art. Flourishing between the 5th and 1st centuries BCE, Latin wasn't an empire. It was a cultural mosaic tied together by shared aesthetics, burial practices, and symbols. Their hill forts, like Bibracte and Oppidum, were early urban centers, defensible, organized, and often politically autonomous. Inside graves, we find weapons, jewelry, and detailed metalwork, spirals, animal motifs, abstract patterns that feel almost modern in their complexity. But the Latin people had no writing system of their own. Their legacy lives through objects, not text. When the Romans arrived, many of these societies were absorbed, displaced, or erased. Still, their influence lingers in myths, place names, and the quiet artistry of torques and swords buried in rivers, a culture without an empire, yet rich enough to haunt the soil.
79. Stonehenge and surrounding landscape, Avebury, Silbury Hill, Durrington Walls. Stonehenge is just the start. While the iconic stone circle on Salisbury Plain gets the fame, it's only one monument in a vast, interconnected ceremonial landscape that includes Avebury's massive stone ring, Silbury Hill's mysterious artificial mound, and the sprawling settlement at Durrington Walls. Built over centuries, this area was a ritual complex on a scale unmatched in Neolithic Britain. The alignment of stones to solstices, the movement of cattle herds during feasting events, and the sheer labor involved all suggest coordinated, deeply symbolic activity. Durrington Walls, likely home to the builders of Stonehenge, showed signs of massive seasonal gatherings, perhaps religious festivals or communal rites. Silbury Hill remains enigmatic. No tomb has been found, yet it rivals the Egyptian pyramids in as an effort. Together, these monuments form a prehistoric stage where landscape and belief were choreographed. Stonehenge isn't a monument, it's the headline act of a lost spiritual epic. 80. Skara, Bray, and Orkney. Archaic complexes, e.g., Ness of Brodgar. Skara Brae may be the best preserved Neolithic village in Europe, but it's just one stone in the grand mosaic of Orkney's prehistoric landscape. Stretching across the islands are ritual circles, burial cairns, and enigmatic complexes like the Ness of Brodgar, a sprawling ceremonial site discovered only in the early 2000s. At Ness, archaeologists found intricately paved buildings, decorated stone slabs, pigments, and what appears to be a Neolithic cathedral of sorts, a massive hall flanked by standing stones and symmetrical entrances. The construction was precise, the layout intentional. This wasn't casual habitation, it was ritual architecture on a scale rarely associated with pre-civilized people. Together with sites like Maeshowe and the Ring of Brodgar, Orkney emerges not as a remote outpost, but as a cultural powerhouse of prehistoric Europe, a place where stone was memory and architecture was belief, long before written language etched anything into clay, and yet we still don't know exactly why they built it all. Iskstimbir, Göbekli Tepe comparable sites, e.g., Nevelachori, Karahan Tepe. As Göbekli Tepe shattered timelines, nearby sites like Nevelachori and Karahan Tepe have deepened the shock. These weren't isolated oddities. They were part of a broader pattern of monumental architecture by pre-agricultural societies. Nevelachori, now submerged beneath a dam reservoir, was the first site to reveal those familiar T-shaped pillars. Karahan Tepe, still under excavation, features even older structures and more of them. At Karahan Tepe, deep pits carved into bedrock contain stone heads, standing pillars, and platforms. Some pillars have human arms carved onto them, echoing Göbekli's anthropomorphic stones. These structures suggest symbolic, possibly ritual, activity performed by societies not yet fully reliant on farming. This throws a wrench into the neat theory of agriculture before civilization. It suggests belief and collective identity may have driven the invention of social structure, temples before cities. The more we find, the more the origin story of civilization dissolves into myth. 82. Ice Age Art of Sulawesi, Indonesia. In a cave on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, hidden behind layers of time and stone, ancient people left something extraordinary: red ochre handprints, painted pigs, and wild bovines rendered with surprising sophistication. These artworks, some dated to at least 45,000 years ago, are among the oldest known figurative cave paintings on Earth. That's older than Lascaux, older than Chauvet, older than almost anything Europe can claim. It forces a rewrite of the symbolic timeline, proof that the birth of art wasn't confined to one continent or cultural stream. These were early humans expressing identity, observing nature, maybe even telling stories, deep in a tropical cave, long before cities or empires existed. The artwork feels familiar. The handprints are hauntingly human, and so Sulawesi becomes more than a dot on the map. It's a reminder that creativity is ancient, global, and endlessly resurfacing in the dark.
83. King Tut's tomb, unopened annexes on hidden chambers. Even Tutankhamun, whose tomb has been studied obsessively for a century, may still have secrets to tell. Recent radar surveys of the tomb's walls in KV62 suggested the possibility of hidden chambers, sealed rooms beyond the known layout, perhaps containing more burial goods, or even another royal burial, such as that of Queen Nefertiti. These theories remain hotly debated. Some scans have shown anomalies, others have failed to replicate them. But the idea won't die that behind the Golden Boy King's tomb lies another secret hidden in plain plaster. If true, it could reshape our understanding of the Amarna period. If false, it still reveals something curious. The way ancient tombs keep reactivating mystery, no matter how many times they're measured. Sometimes archaeology isn't about the discovery itself, it's about the lingering tension between what we know and what we hope might still be behind the wall.
84. The Royal Tomb at Monte Alban. Tomb 7, Zapotec Offerings. Tomb 7 at Monte Alban isn't just a burial site, it's a museum sealed in stone. Discovered in 1932 by Mexican archaeologist Alfonso Caso, the tomb revealed a trove of gold, turquoise, obsidian, and intricately worked jewelry, much of it reflecting Mixtec craftsmanship, though it lay within a Zapotec ceremonial center. What's compelling is the cultural layering. The tomb dates from a later reuse period, showing how Monte Alban remained spiritually important long after its political decline. The burial goods blend artistic styles, religious iconography, and social symbolism, proof of overlapping identities and long-term memory in Mesoamerican culture. Among the offerings was a human skull covered in turquoise mosaic, both beautiful and unsettling. But this wasn't horror, it was reverence. The tomb wasn't a place of decay, it was a chamber of transformation, a story carved in jade, gold, and bone, a legacy built not just on kingship, but on continuity.
85. The Sphinx's shafts, hidden chambers, and geological studies. The Great Sphinx of Giza has never been short on mystery, but in recent decades, attention has shifted from its familiar face to what might lie beneath it. Researchers have detected possible cavities, tunnels, and anomalies under the Sphinx's paws and around its base, sparking speculation about hidden chambers or lost archives, rumors that go back as far as ancient Greek historians. Geological studies have added fuel to the fire. Some scholars argue the weathering patterns on the Sphinx suggest water erosion, possibly dating the monument to an earlier, wetter epoch than traditionally accepted. That would place its origin well before the reign of Khafra, challenging Egypt's accepted timeline. Official excavations have been cautious, with many areas left unexcavated to preserve structural integrity, but the allure remains. Could the Sphinx be guarding more than just desert silence? Sometimes it's the immovable stone that hides the deepest uncertainty.
86. The Black Sea. Submerged settlements, e.g., under Bosporus. Beneath the Black Sea's tranquil surface lies a landscape that was once dry land, and maybe even home to thriving Neolithic communities. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, marine archaeologists discovered submerged structures, possible dwellings, and signs of human activity more than 90 meters below sea level. Some researchers link this to the hypothesis of a sudden, catastrophic flood around 5600 BCE, when Mediterranean waters are thought to have broken through the Bosporus Strait and rapidly filled the Black Sea basin. This Black Sea deluge theory even sparked comparisons to flood myths in global traditions, including the story of Noah. Whether or not a global flood inspired ancient legends, these underwater finds confirm one thing: dramatic shifts in sea levels erased entire coastlines and settlements, from human memory? And if civilization's early chapters are underwater, how many more are waiting just out of reach beneath the waves? 87. Göbekli Tepe's older structures behind the main mounds. As groundbreaking as Göbekli Tepe already is, recent excavations suggest we may have only scratched its surface, literally. Beneath the known enclosures, deeper layers are being revealed that may predate the primary structures by centuries, perhaps even millennia. Some of these deeper levels include smaller, simpler stone circles, indicating that the monumental T-pillars of Göbekli weren't an overnight innovation. They evolved from earlier forms of sacred architecture. This pushes the origins of organized ritual and symbolic construction even further back into the Mesolithic. It suggests continuity, not a sudden leap. Culture building on culture, memory layered in limestone. If the visible monuments at Göbekli Tepe are already thousands of years older than Stonehenge, what does it mean when those very monuments rest atop even older ones? Sometimes the past doesn't just surprise, it quietly redefines the whole foundation of what we thought we knew. 88. Ancient DNA finds in graves, e.g., Ötzi, steppe migrations. For centuries, we've studied bones, artifacts, and architecture, but now we study genomes, and it's changing everything. From Ötzi the Iceman to burial sites across Europe and Asia, ancient DNA has reshaped our understanding of ancestry, migration, and identity. One of the most seismic revelations came from analyzing ancient remains in the Eurasian steppe. DNA evidence revealed massive population shifts during the Bronze Age, including the spread of Indo-European languages, once debated, now backed by genetic proof. These migrations didn't just move people, they moved culture, language, and ideas. In Britain, DNA from Neolithic skeletons showed a replacement of earlier populations by incoming farmers. Elsewhere, graves thought to be elite due to burial goods turned out to contain people with diverse genetic backgrounds. Ancient DNA doesn't just add detail, it unravels assumptions. Every burial becomes a biography, every tomb a library of inherited memory, and the more we read, the more complex the story becomes.
89. Sutton Hoo's other grave finds, helmet, shield, regalia. While the ship burial at Sutton Hoo is the centerpiece, the details within it are what truly expand the narrative. Among the most iconic discoveries was the ceremonial helmet, intricately decorated with tinned bronze panels, dragon motifs, and a haunting human face. It's now one of the defining symbols of Anglo-Saxon craftsmanship and identity. But it wasn't alone. A shield, a gold belt buckle, weaponry, feasting gear, and Byzantine silverware were all part of the burial. Together, these items suggest a man not only of wealth, but of cultural connection, linked to Scandinavian, Byzantine, and local traditions. These artifacts also challenge the idea of the Dark Ages as culturally stagnant. Here was art, metallurgy, symbolism, and international contact, all buried in a single mound, and still we don't know exactly who was buried there. Maybe King Radwald, maybe someone else entirely. It turns out the artifacts are more certain than the identity they were meant to immortalize.
90. The Uluburun shipwreck, Turkey, discovered by a sponge diver in 1982 off the coast of southern Turkey. The Uluburun shipwreck is a time capsule from the late Bronze Age, preserved beneath the Mediterranean for over 3,000 years. What emerged from its depths was not just a ship, it was an entire world in cargo form. The vessel carried a staggering mix of goods: copper ingots from Cyprus, tin from Central Asia, glass from Mesopotamia, ivory, gold, Canaanite jars filled with resin, Egyptian scarabs, Mycenaean pottery, and even a ceremonial axe. It was a floating catalog of international trade in the 14th century BCE, linking cultures from the Aegean to the Levant, and yet we still don't know where the ship came from or where it was going. Uluburun reminds us that the Bronze Age wasn't isolated kingdoms, it was a web of exchange, ambition, and complexity. One storm and it all vanished into the sea.
91. Antikythera mechanism, Greece, recovered from a Roman-era shipwreck near the island of Antikythera in 1901. The Antikythera mechanism looked at first like corroded scrap. Then researchers realized it contained gears, dozens of them. Over the next century, it became clear this was an ancient analog computer built in the 1st or 2nd century BCE, capable of predicting astronomical positions, eclipses, and even Olympic Games scheduling. It's the kind of object that shouldn't exist, at least not with the level of sophistication it displays. No other device like it has been found from antiquity. Its precision rivaled 18th century clockwork, and yet it came from a world we imagine still chiseling sundials. The Antikythera mechanism has no known inventor, no workshop of origin, no direct successors. It appears fully formed, then disappears. It's not just a technological marvel, it's an enigma in bronze, and it still ticks inside our imagination more than 2 millennia later. 92. Tomb of Pakal, Palenque. Deep beneath the Temple of the Inscriptions in the Maya city of Palenque lies the tomb of Kinich Janaab Pakal, better known as Pakal the Great. Discovered in 1952, it was the first intact royal tomb found in a Maya pyramid, revealing not just a burial, but a cosmic narrative carved in stone. Pakal's sarcophagus lid, famously misinterpreted as depicting a rocket ship by ancient astronaut enthusiasts, actually shows the king descending into the underworld, his body reclining between the realms of earth and sky, surrounded by intricate iconography of death and rebirth. His jade funerary mask, mosaic adornments, and hieroglyphic inscriptions confirmed that the Maya were not only master builders, but complex thinkers, weaving theology, astronomy, and rulership into every aspect of their monuments. Pakal ruled for nearly 70 years. In death, he became immortal through limestone and myth, and his story still echoes through the ruins he once commanded. 93. Inca roads, terraces, bridges, Capac Ñan, etc. The Inca didn't leave behind towering statues or vast libraries, but they did leave roads, thousands of miles of them. Known collectively as the Capac Ñan, the Inca road system stretched across the Andes, binding together one of the most diverse and topographically challenging empires in history. Suspension bridges made of braided grass spanned ravines. Terraced hillsides tamed vertical agriculture. Storage houses called kolkhas dotted the routes, supplying imperial messengers who could run over 150 miles in a day. It was infrastructure as empire, political control through stone steps, and logistical mastery. The roads weren't just functional, they were sacred. Some paths were used for ritual pilgrimages, and many align with celestial events. Today, many of these roads still exist, some still in use, others buried beneath modern highways. It wasn't a monument to be visited, it was a world to be walked.
94. Roman frontier forts, lime systems, Hadrian's Wall, Limes Germanicus, Antonine Wall. The Roman Empire's edges weren't just vague borders, they were engineered lines of power across Europe and the Near East. The Romans built limes, pronounced limes, systems of forts, watchtowers, ditches, and roads designed to mark, defend, and manage the limits of Roman control. Hadrian's Wall in Britain is the most famous, a 73-mile-long fortification stretching across the island's narrowest point. It wasn't just a military barrier, it was an administrative checkpoint, a symbol of imperial authority, and likely a place of trade, taxation, and cultural exchange. Further east, the Limes Germanicus ran through forests and rivers, connecting a web of fortresses and frontier towns. Soldiers stationed there became locals over generations, blending cultures, languages, and beliefs. These boundaries weren't impermeable, they were breathing edges, porous and tense, because even empires need fences, not just to keep enemies out, but to remind themselves where their world ends.
95. Maya codices and inscriptions, e.g., Palenque, Copan, Yaxchilan. For centuries, the Maya script was a mystery, beautiful, unreadable, and etched into monuments like whispers in a dead language. But that silence cracked open in the 20th century, and now the Maya are speaking again through their codices, their stelae, and the intricate inscriptions carved into temple walls at cities like Palenque, Copan, and Yaxchilan. These weren't random symbols. They were full sentences, histories, calendars, and poetic names. The Maya chronicled their kings' births, accessions, marriages, wars, and even eclipses with stunning precision. The Palenque inscriptions brought Pakal the Great back to life. Copan gave us detailed royal genealogies. Yaxchilan's lintels depicted queens and bloodletting rituals, anchoring myth to flesh. Out of the four surviving codices, Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and Grolier, only one is fully intact. The rest were burned in colonial campaigns of cultural erasure, but the stone resisted the flames. Today, decipherment continues to unfold like a plot twist centuries in the making, and with every translation, the Maya become less of a romantic ruin and more of a civilization we can read page by page, stela by stela, voice by voice. Some empires speak through conquests. The Maya whispered through time and waited for us to listen. 96. Stelae and inscriptions of Olmec. Early Mesoamerica, e.g., Levanta, Cascajal block. Before the Maya, before the Aztec, the Olmec sculpted stone into gods. Their colossal heads, some over 9 feet tall and weighing tons, are instantly recognizable, but it's their inscriptions, not their statues, that quietly hold one of the deepest puzzles in Mesoamerican history. At sites like Levanta and San Lorenzo, the Olmec carved stelae, vertical stone slabs, engraved with abstract symbols and human figures in ceremonial dress. Then came the Cascajal block, found in Veracruz in the early 2000s, inscribed with 62 characters that don't match any known writing system. If authentic, it would be the oldest known writing in the Americas. What do the symbols mean? Are they names, rituals, dates, or something more metaphoric? No one knows for sure. The Olmec left no Rosetta Stone, no helpful translations, just hints. They were the cultural grandparents of Mesoamerica, influencing later civilizations with their iconography, city planning, and possibly even written language. But their words, if that's what they are, remain sealed in stone. The Olmec didn't just sculpt faces. They carved riddles that stare back at us, unblinking from across 3 millennia.
97. The Sutton Hoo, Bromswell Bucket, recent reinterpretation. Tucked within the now iconic Sutton Hoo burial mounds lies an artifact less famous than the helmet or shield, but no less mysterious. A simple wooden bucket, bound in bronze, discovered in a less glamorous corner of the site near Bromswell. For decades, it was thought to be a utilitarian item, just another burial good in a wealthy Anglo-Saxon grave. But a fresh look changed everything. Recent studies revealed the bucket had traces of organic residue, possibly ceremonial drinks or fermented substances, suggesting it was used in a ritual context. Even more curiously, its design bore unexpected similarities to objects found in Northern Europe, indicating a broader cultural connection across the North Sea. This wasn't a peasant's pail. It was a ritual object in a royal tomb. Its reinterpretation echoes a broader truth about archaeology. The mundane is often sacred, and the smallest details can flip the entire narrative. One vessel, overlooked for decades, quietly reshaped our understanding of early medieval belief systems and long distance exchange. Sometimes history hides not in the grand treasures, but in the things we almost threw away. 98. Newly uncovered frescoes, ritual halls in Pompeii, e.g., Dionysian frescoes. Pompeii was already frozen in time, but somehow it keeps evolving. As new excavations push into previously untouched areas, what they're uncovering is as vivid as anything in the city's better known quarters. Among the most striking are the recently revealed frescoes, many rich with color, movement, and strange rituals. One of the most talked about finds is the Dionysian Hall, wall paintings of figures wrapped in vines, women in ecstatic poses, masks, and symbols of transformation. Was it a cult initiation chamber, a private party room, a metaphor made plaster? All are possible. The Romans were skilled at mixing the sacred with the profane. Other frescoes depict mythological scenes, forbidden romances, or simply fruit and architecture painted with almost photographic detail. These images give us a glimpse not just of Roman beliefs, but Roman moods, desire, fear, joy, indulgence. Pompeii isn't just a ruin, it's a personality, and it keeps revealing itself, one painted wall at a time. Not everything burned there was lost.
99. House in Histria, Roman era Romania, with treasure and burned remains. In the coastal ruins of Histria, an ancient Greek and later Roman city in present-day Romania, archaeologists uncovered what looked like a typical Roman house until they reached its last layer. Inside, they found a hoard of treasure hastily hidden, coins, jewelry, silver vessels, rushed into concealment beneath the floor, and above that, the charred remains of what had been walls, furniture, and everyday life. It wasn't just the valuables that told the story, it was the absence of order. This wasn't planned, it was interrupted. The household had been caught mid-flight. What caused the fire? Barbarian raids, internal revolt, local conflict. The records are silent, but the scene is loud. Histria is a city that lived on trade routes, always at the edge of empires, and edges are where stories get cut short. The house's frozen moment tells of fear, urgency, and the small decisions that history rarely records, like which room to run to when the world is collapsing. It's a reminder history often survives, not because it was meant to, but because someone didn't have time to pack. 100. High-end Iron Age blacksmith workshop in Oxfordshire, UK. In 2024, archaeologists digging in Oxfordshire didn't just uncover a forge, they found a window into the industrial soul of Iron Age Britain. This wasn't a makeshift campfire with a hammer and anvil. This was a sophisticated blacksmith's workshop, complete with evidence of high-temperature furnaces, expertly forged tools, and fragments of iron objects crafted with precision that wouldn't look out of place a millennium later. The site revealed layers of slag, specialized hearths, and evidence of alloy experimentation, suggesting not only technical expertise, but social importance. This wasn't just someone making horseshoes. This was elite metalworking, possibly serving tribal leaders, or warrior classes, or even forming part of a broader trade network. It challenges the common view of Iron Age Britain as backward or disconnected. The workshop shows a high level of organization, labor specialization, and technical mastery. It proves that before the Romans imposed their roads and scripts, local ingenuity was already hot at work, literally. The forge, it seems, was not just for weapons, but for shaping identity and influence. The hammering of iron may well have been the heartbeat of early British complexity. And with that final clang of the hammer, our journey through 100 game-changing archaeological discoveries comes to a close, though history, as always, is never finished being rewritten.